Hey, welcome back to Enchanted's Kitchen. Today I'm making raisin buns, similar to the ones that you find at Chinese or Cantonese bakeries. I got a request last week asking for a recipe that uses tangzong, and I thought to make it interesting and also really tasty, I'm going to incorporate the brioche method as well, where we incorporate lots of butter and eggs to really enrich this bread so it has that nice, soft, pillowy texture. Perfect for this time of year. So you want to start out with a large mixing bowl that I already pre-measured my bread flour into, and then to that you want to add 1/3 of a cup or 68 grams of granulated white sugar, which honestly I think I could have added a little bit more sugar just to help sweeten up the bread a little bit more. And then you see me here just wavering that half teaspoon or 2 grams of salt, which I realized I didn't need because, you know, there's a lot of butter in this recipe, and all I had on hand was salted butter. So I decided to just forego the salt for this recipe just to make sure my bread didn't turn out too salty. But if you're using unsalted butter, definitely add that half teaspoon of salt. And then you just want to pre-mix all those ingredients together to evenly distribute. And as far as the remaining ingredients, you want to have 2 large egg yolks at room temperature, along with 2 1/4 teaspoons, 1 packet or 7 grams of active dry yeast, or you can use instant or rapid rise yeast, which is what I have here. And then, like I mentioned earlier, this is a part brioche bread, so definitely lots of butter, because that's what makes it taste good and make it nice and rich and decadent. And make sure that butter, by the way, is nice and soft at room temperature. And you can have raisin bread or raisin buns without raisins, of course, or you can use any dried fruit of your choice, like some dried currants or dried cranberries will also be really good here. And it'll just pair beautifully with this orange zest that I have here. So aromatic, and of course butter, orange, like, yeah, it's gonna taste good. So like I mentioned in the beginning, this is part tangzong, part brioche, and so the tangzong portion includes this like unique kind of thing here where we make a roux essentially. So a combination of flour, which we pre-measured earlier. I'm just taking a portion of that, adding that to some milk into a small saucepan, and I like to use like cold milk in the beginning just because I feel like you get less lumps when you whisk it together. And here basically you're making a slurry and eventually cooking it over the stovetop and making a roux, and that helps to hold on to the moisture in the bread. So even after a few days you still have maybe some leftover bread, and then you reheat it. I always recommend reheating your bread in like a microwave, for example, so that way you get like the maximum freshness and taste and texture. But anyways, this roux really helps to hold on to that moisture and make your bread taste fresh even days after it's done baking. So I just kind of refueled my little burner there and just turned it on about like medium high heat or so. Just make sure to not walk away from the stove at this point, because it's dangerous and you don't want this thing to burn. So just go ahead and mix this like milky, creamy liquid concoction here. Whisk it over medium heat until it gets nice and thick. And like I said, similar to a roux, like definitely thicker than your average gravy roux. But yeah, this is definitely what makes the texture of the bread. And so you want to make sure that you cool this down completely. Make sure it's not hot whatsoever, not even tepid, before you add it to the rest of your ingredients. So speaking of the rest of the ingredients, you want to measure out some milk. You might have noticed earlier I used 2% reduced fat milk, but honestly, if you're going through the effort of making brioche bread, just use the full fat milk and just, you know, don't eat the whole like loaf, okay? So go ahead and just heat your milk up. I heat it to like about 120 degrees or so Fahrenheit, whatever that is Celsius. And I like to just do that to give my yeast like a jump start, and also to make sure that my yeast that's been hanging out in my fridge, in the back of the fridge, is still alive. So I go ahead and add my yeast to my lukewarm milk. Added just a pinch of sugar just to kind of get it started, because you know we need to feed our little friendly microbes there. They like sugar just like the rest of us. And go ahead and whisk that together till it's all smooth and homogenized, and just let it sit on your countertop. Let it do its magic there, and after hopefully about 5 to 7 minutes and your yeast is still alive and active, you see a lot of action there with all the bubbles on top, so the yeast is all good to go. What we're going to do now is just make our bread. So I have the bowl that has all that bread flour, sugar mixture in there. I'm adding my cooled down tangzong, or the roux basically, that I cooked earlier, that again is nice and cool. Adding that straight into the bowl of a stand mixer fitted with a dough hook attachment, that little crazy little hook little device there. But you can certainly do this by hand too, just take a lot longer. So now I'm just adding my 2 egg yolks, and it takes about 20 minutes to knead this dough. Well, I guess between mixing the ingredients and then like properly kneading it, that took me a total of maybe like 20-ish minutes using the stand mixer on low speed. So if you do it by hand, unless you're really really strong, it would probably take a little bit longer than 20 minutes. So go ahead and just add all your ingredients minus the butter. Now I'm just adding in my proofed yeast mixture there. Add it all in, every last bit, every last drop. Don't miss any of it. And then once that's in there, that's basically, well, not quite the last of our ingredients, definitely not the last, but you want to lower the head of your mixer down, lock it into place, and then you want to start slowly, although I probably should take my own advice because I just lost patience. Essentially, this part you're just moistening all the flour. You can see there I lost patience and just kind of turn up the speed on my mixer. Basically, you just want it all moistened before we start adding our butter. So we have 6 tablespoons, or what is that? I cannot do math in my head, so I'll write it all down in the description box below. All the details, all the ingredients and how much and all that stuff. So I just added 6 tablespoons of butter, just 1 tablespoon at a time. And like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of essential here that your butter is at room temperature, so very soft. That way it incorporates completely into our dough, and it's just so delicious. It's gonna really enrich this bread, give it a nice, soft, pliable texture, and of course, the taste of butter is delicious, obviously. So, and somewhere along the line, I did add the orange zest as well, but forgot to film that part. So now I'm just adding my raisins. And I'm just going to let that dough knead for an additional 10 minutes or so, just until it's nice and elastic. And then once the dough is all done kneading, after about 20 minutes or so, you'll have quite a bit of dried fruit stuck there on the bottom of the bowl, but definitely don't waste it, don't throw it away. Just go ahead and stick it back in. And you could just incorporate it by hand. No, not a problem at all. And it really is like just a pleasure for all the senses. The smell, the feel of this dough is so soft and pliable with all the butter, of course, So you better bet it's gonna taste so delicious too. So once you're done kind of playing with your dough and making sure you're not missing any of those raisins that try to escape, you want to form that dough into a large dough ball and put it into a bowl to let rise and double in size. And after it's been proofed and double in size, like any bread, you want to go ahead and just flatten your dough out to remove any of those air pockets or air bubbles. And I just ended up using a roller. You could just stretch this thing too. It's like I said, it's just such a pleasure to work with. So soft and so malleable and pliable. So go ahead and just roll that dough out. I did not measure. I completely forgot to do that, but I think it was probably like close to like 11 by 14, perhaps, thereabouts. 11 inches by 14 inches, roughly. But anyway, just go ahead and roll it out. And the idea here is you just want to cut it into even sized pieces, which honestly, like in retrospect, I think it would have been a lot easier just to roll it into a cylinder and then just cut it into pieces. I don't know why I decided to roll it flat and then cut it into like large rectangles. It doesn't really make much sense, to be honest with you. And eventually I just took each piece of dough and rolled it into a small cylinder. And you can see there, in comparison to the size of my bench scraper, it's probably like a few inches long, you know? And just keep in mind that these are small now, but they will grow as they rise for a second time. So now, in order to create that nice braided look, I guess kind of like a, not quite a babka look, but like just a braided look, you just want to cut your dough down in half lengthwise, but just leaving it attached at one end, and then just basically braid it, like just overlap one over the other, and then you have that nice kind of braided appearance there. Nice twist. Once I overlap those pieces of dough together, I also like to give it just a slight twist, kind of to accentuate that braided look, you know. And then once you braided all your dough, you want to go ahead and just lay it onto some sort of lined baking sheet. I'm using a silpat here. You can use parchment paper, or you can even just butter it or oil it or something like that, just so it doesn't stick. I do like to give it actually two layers or two coats of egg wash, which is optional. You know, the more egg wash you apply, the darker it will be. So I did this before it was proofed, and then later on for the second proof, I would apply the egg wash for a second time, and it really gives it that nice golden hue, which I kind of like. I like a nice tan colored bread. And then I just kind of covered it using a piece of buttered saran wrap. And then, like I said, after the second proof, you can see they got about double in size or so. I'm just giving it a second egg wash here. You want to stick them into a 350 degree Fahrenheit oven, 180 degrees Celsius, and bake anywhere between 12 to 15 minutes, just until they're nice and golden brown and just beautiful. Just look at that nice kind of light shine to the top that we're just going to enhance with a little bit of melted butter. You know, I mean, we already put so much butter, I don't think it really matters. If we add a very, very faint light layer just to really enhance and accentuate that shiny, you know, top to your bread. And it just smells so heavenly, so delicious. Nothing like warm, fresh baked bread out of the oven. And I just love how sweet the little specks of raisins make it. Like I said in the beginning, I think I would have added a little bit more sugar, because I felt like the bread just needed it. Since this is like a sweeter bread, it's not really savory, of course. So yeah, it actually reminds me between the orange zest and some of the dried fruit, like really if I had some candied fruit, perhaps like a candied orange peel in it, it really kind of reminds me of panettone. So like the Italian bread that, you know, you often see during Christmas or holiday season. So yeah, it's just buttery, rich, and delicious, and almost flaky in texture. Make sure to reheat it as well, like for about 20-30 seconds in the microwave on high. If you know, have any leftover, definitely let me know if you make this one, if you make this recipe. And I hopefully am looking forward to making more like dim sum related content here. But definitely let me know, shoot me a comment, you know, for any inspiration for different recipes, and I'll see you back here next time. Bye!